The question I want to explore today is, what happens if we don't build a pipeline? This episode is about pipelines, but it's also about hesitation. Because when Canada talks about building major projects, we spend a lot of time talking about what's the cost and the risk of building a pipeline, and not nearly enough time talking about what are the costs and risks of not building one. Let's get into it. We are asking the wrong question about the pipeline. Okay, lately I've been thinking a lot about hesitation. So buckle in because this is going to be a juicy one. Hesitation, like the big kind. The kind where you know something probably has to change, but you still can't quite make yourself do it. We've all been there. Do I stay in the job or do I quit? Do I work for someone else? Do I try working on my own? Other words, do I keep talking about changing my habits, my health, my eating, but I never actually start? Do I stay in that relationship that is just run its course? Do I fire the employee? Do I quit the friend? Do I finally break up? Do I choose myself for once? I don't know. These are hard decisions, and I'm hearing them in a lot of places because it's real life. It's what we do. And these are big decisions, not just because they're practical decisions. They become identity decisions. It's not just the logistics. When you make these questions part of your situation, you're asking yourself, who am I if I change my mind? What about what I said before? The promises I made, the people I made them to, like what will people say? What about the people who won't understand? Like, what would this decision cost me? What do I have to give up? So basically, these big decisions that come across all of our lives at some point, we're asking, oh my gosh, what's the worst that could happen? Because that's what we do. And those are real questions. But notice something. Almost all those questions are designed to protect the life you already have. They mostly give you answers for why not to change. And this is human, because change is hard. Change is the hardest thing to do, and it's easier to stay in a place that doesn't feel right, but that you are familiar with. But at some point, you have to start asking different questions like, what am I missing if I don't act now? Or what can I gain if I do act? Or what's the cost of staying exactly where I am? Or even better, what could get better if I don't stay? What could my life look like on the other side of this? So it's not just ask yourself, what's the worst that could happen? But we always need to remember also to say, what's the best that could happen? And remember too that not choosing is still a choice. Hesitation has a cost. And lately, I can't stop thinking that Canada sounds exactly like this on a lot of topics, including pipelines. Because this pipeline debate in this country increasingly feels less like a debate about pipelines and more like a country just trying to decide whether we still believe in ourselves enough to make a change, to grow, to be different. Sometimes being smart enough isn't getting more information. It's about asking better questions. And right now, I think Canada is asking the wrong ones. The pipeline story, it's not some random issue that pops up once in a while. It is a headline story in one form or another all the time. It can show up as a new pipeline agreement, a federal condition, a provincial objection. It could be an investor question. It could be a fight about emissions, a fight about who pays. It is not a fluke that a pipeline is connected to all of these topics. And is it exhausting? Sure. Would it be easier to just check out of the discussion? For now, maybe. But will it make the underlying issues go away? Not a chance. They almost certainly will get bigger, like most decisions we ignore or kick down the road. Now, recently, Prime Minister Mark Carney and Alberta Premier Danielle Smith, they signed an agreement, an MOU, and it supports the possibility of a major new energy infrastructure like a new oil pipeline to the West Coast. This idea is not small. Potentially up to 1 million barrels a day, or for context, we're talking like a $5 billion windfall for governments every year. This is a major national project that could reshape Canada's access to global markets, but really reshape how we are in the world. It's a big deal. But it's far from done. Right away afterward, you could take one piece of the puzzle and say, oh, carbon price. So we get distracted from this big piece. And now, okay, Energy Minister Tim Hodgson's talking to Bloomberg, and he's saying, yeah, there's a carbon price, but companies can afford to pay it. And they can build a $16.5 billion Pathways carbon capture project. Okay. And then industry, predictably, pushes back and they're like, those are costs no one else has to pay. When you put the Pathways with the carbon pricing and other pressures, Canada looks less competitive and people won't choose us and we miss the moment. Both objectively true. Then you've got BC's current government that is still opposing oil pipelines to the province. There is no confirmed private investor. There's no agreed route. Indigenous consultation required, but unresolved. These are real questions, and there exists more about tanker restrictions, emissions, financing, and long-term economics. Oh my gosh, these are real questions. How do we pay for it? Who do we have to give up? Who carries the risk? What are the trade-offs? Who should pay? Who has the rights to say yes? Who has the right to say no? What do Indigenous communities need or deserve? I mean, there's so many things to ask, and they are serious questions. They require care and serious negotiation. Absolutely. But let me go back again. These are still not the biggest questions. And while important, they shouldn't be the first question. Because if all we ask is, who can we build this? Who pays? Who's got the risk? Who gives something up? We mostly get answers about why it's hard, and it is hard. Of course it's hard, but that's not enough. It's not a reason to not do it. We have to ask ourselves, what happens if we don't build? What's the price of not building a pipeline, of not seizing the moment, of not taking our chance to be an energy superpower? What will we miss? What opportunity closes? What future becomes impossible for our kids and our grandkids and the next people, or even for ourselves in 10 years, frankly, if we don't make a decision when we have the chance? This is where the whole conversation changes. If you put in the wrong question, you won't get the right answer. It's like using AI. You get an answer no matter what you put in, but sometimes you're like, that's not what I'm looking for. If you put in the wrong prompt, you won't get a good answer. So if Canada keeps just asking, can we build this pipeline and things like those things, we're going to get the answers of the debate we've been having. Permits, politics, carbon pricing, investor risk. But if we ask, what happens if we don't do it? Now we're talking about something bigger. Canadian security, Canadian independence, our trade partnerships, our influence, our leverage, our timing, our national ambition and identity, and whether Canada still knows how to act strategically before a window closes. Because at some level, I think almost everyone I've talked to involved knows three things, and they're hard to dispute. Does the world still need energy? Absolutely. Is the world broadly looking for reliable suppliers of that energy? Absolutely. And Canada has what many countries are looking for. And so, and then I would add a third one. Would a pipeline eventually pay for itself and bring revenues? I think the answer is yes. It's just a question of who pays for it up front. So anyway, this debate is increasingly feeling like a question of possibility, less like a question of possibility and more like a question of willingness. But I digress. Prime Minister Carney did say something in Vancouver recently. It stuck with me. He said, in a rapidly changing world, Canada must become the source of affordable, clean, reliable power. Because, and this is the key part, when we master energy, we master our destiny. That is the conversation Canada says it wants to have. Master energy, master destiny. This is big language. And I like when big language is attached to building in Canada. Not endless arguing about why things are hard, or a serious conversation about what are we actually going to build. Because countries are judged by what we build, not what we announce, not what we study, not what we support in principle or in a press release, but what we actually build, what we actually deliver. And right now, Canada's got a lot of ambition on paper. We're an energy superpower, AI leader, critical minerals powerhouse, reliable ally, secure supplier, nation building projects. This is great language. I love this language. I think it suits us. But eventually the question becomes, are we going to build that version of Canada we keep describing? Or are we just going to stay in this infinite loop, indefinitely of being the same? That's the hesitation question I've been thinking about. It's uncomfortable. Change is not clean. Building a major pipeline is not politically, environmentally, economically, or emotionally simple. There are absolutely trade-offs. There are risks, there are costs. People will be angry. People will say we're moving too fast. Others will say we're still not moving near fast enough. This is what big decisions feel like. They are hard in life and in countries. They rarely arrive wrapped in certainty. They arrive with consequences on both sides. And then you got to just do some adulting. You got to choose. And one other thing I want to say about Canada is right now, I think everyone in this conversation in this country still has the luxury of being complacent. We don't have to decide yet. We can be like, meh, industry can still get some oil out there and protect their margins and focus on the shareholder right now. Government can attach its traditions. Provinces can say no or yes. Investors can wait. And Canadians, you and I, we can just be like, meh, I'm going to sit this one out. Everyone can insist that someone else has to make decisions, someone else has to move forward, or we can all just sit still, and in this weird holding pattern where almost everyone says the outcome matters and wants all this grandeur, but nobody wants to absorb the cost of making it happen or of making the decision. And that luxury in Canada will not last. Much of the world has already moved past the question of whether energy security matters. They know it does. Countries who are dependent on unstable suppliers have learned the hard way. Canada still has the luxury of debating whether the urgency is real. Other countries are living with the consequences today. And that's where complacency, hesitation, becomes dangerous. Because Canada's not starting from nothing. We have enormous resources. We have political stability, relatively, rule of law, long-standing alliances. We have the energy and the resources the world desperately needs. On paper, again, we are exactly the kind of supplier the world says it wants. But resources and having them does not create influence. The infrastructure does. If you can't get that stuff from the dirt to our customers, there's no leverage. We have potential. And potential is only impressive for so long. Sometimes it becomes painful. Think of someone in your life, maybe it's you. Maybe it's you with enormous potential and they keep getting in their own way. You can see what they could be. You can see the opportunity. You can see the path, but they just keep waiting, spinning for perfect timing, for perfect certainty, for clarity, for a version of change that has no cost. And it's painful to watch. Except in this case, Canada, we are not powerless. This is our country. These are our decisions. This is our window. And I keep thinking about another line from Carney in Vancouver not long ago, talking about port capacity and exports. And they said, do we have enough room for the ports? He's like, hey, I would like to run out of capacity even sooner than that, because that would mean that we are growing our exports faster than that. That means we need to act now. That is, to me, exactly it. That is the mindset shift that we are looking for. It's not how do we protect the system we already have, but what would it look like if we actually grew? What's the best that could happen if Canada actually took action? And that's a much more interesting question and a much more useful one. We got examples. Think about LNG. Canada had a major opportunity a few years ago to become a major supplier of liquefied natural gas to Asia. We were out in front. We are way ahead. And what do? We debated, we delayed, we conditioned, we studied, we fought internally. Meanwhile, other countries built, like United States, other countries as well. And then Russia invaded Ukraine. Europe suddenly, holy smokes, we need some stable energy. And Canada, we had nothing to offer. We were not in a position to help them in a near-term way. And that's the thing about infrastructure decisions. The cost of not building usually does not arrive immediately. And that's why we don't think about it, because it arrives years later. The price comes due later. And when it comes due, it comes fast and often all at once. When the window has already started closing and suddenly once, what you thought was cautious or smart starts looking short-sighted. And that's what worries me now, not just on this pipeline, but on nuclear, on transmission lines for the grid, on critical minerals, on AI, housing, ports, major projects generally. The world is speeding up. In Canada, we're acting like we have unlimited time to decide what kind of country we want to be. And I don't think we do. Now, none of this means the concerns are fake. the trade-offs and risks are real, but the cost of not acting is real too. And I think Canada still struggles to fully account for that. Alberta is already producing record oil. Canada is already one of the most important energy producers in the world. Analysts are already warning about future pipeline bottlenecks. We know what's coming. And if production grows but capacity doesn't, we do not stop needing these markets. We just get weaker. Our influence with our allies diminishes, and one of the few strategic cards we had in a more unstable and competitive world. That is why this debate cannot just be about whether one company can afford one project, whether one province likes the route. Those things matter, but they are pieces of a bigger question. Does Canada want to master energy and shape its destiny? Or does it want to keep negotiating with itself until the world makes the decision for us? Because that happens too. In life and in countries, you can avoid a decision for so long, and then eventually it's no longer yours to make. The job changes without you. The relationship ends anyway. The opportunity goes to someone else. The market moves. The house sells. An ally finds another supplier. The investor goes somewhere else. The window closes. And you tell yourself, oh, it was complicated. And it was. But complicated doesn't mean consequence-free. That's the smart enough take for me. The pipeline debate looks like a fight about pipelines. It's not. It is a fight about whether Canada can still make hard decisions while we can still make the choice. It's a fight about whether we understand that hesitation has a cost. And if we keep asking the wrong questions, we will keep having the wrong debate. It's not just what's the worst that could happen, but what's the best that could happen if Canada actually took action. I'm Lynn Exner, and you're smart enough.